How you doing?
Not bad. How about yourself?
Looking forward to the holidays here, taking a little bit of break. Are you, I don't recognize your name. Are you first timer here?
No, but I haven't been able to come regularly.
Okay. Okay. I know the past few weeks I've been sort of in and out, with a little bit of traveling, and I expect through the rest of the year things to be a little bit slower with respect to these weekly sessions, but we're holding it today and then a week from today, and then that's it for the rest of the year. And then we'll pick up again in January. Um, while we're waiting for folks, anything I can help out with, or any questions, or
Um, it's funny. I was having a sort of related, a sort of NSA related call yesterday, and we were kind
Mhm.
of commiserating that, I mean, we've all been at it for a really long time, the job hunt now,
Yeah.
and have reached the point where we're just getting conflicting advice.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. Anything specific where you're
well, one example, I had somebody look at my resume and, she was saying that, my job titles should be exactly what I was hired at the company for. However, I had previously gotten advice because I have worked in such sort of specific niches that it's probably a good idea to include a title that's more meaningful outside the industry,
yeah.
which I had done.
Yeah. Which makes sense, but I can also see what her argument was too. I
I
think
mean, I understand the rationale was, don't put yourself on the hook for something that the
yeah.
company isn't going to confirm.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing that I'll say is that I think what I try to offer here in these sessions is like my perspective, and not to say that my perspective is the sort of the gospel or the single source of truth, right? It's just my perspective as a somebody that's been recruiting for a while, and I think one thing that you guys are probably experiencing that you guys were talking about yesterday was that like there's no one way to do things. There really isn't, and I think it's great though to survey sort of the breadth of perspectives and ideas and ways of doing things that people have, which could, help you refine how you're doing things. Uh, it could either be validating or maybe help you refine, how you're doing things. You might even change the way you're
right.
doing things altogether, right? But
I
um,
mean, and I think that's sort of what we came down to is that at this
mhm.
point, it's basically just people making suggestions based on what worked for them at some
Yeah,
point in the past,
yeah, yeah,
which is basically all anybody can say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Because people are people, and the way one recruiter or hiring manager might interpret what they see on your resume, another recruiter or hiring manager might interpret it completely differently, right? And
Yeah,
how can you predict that?
right. Well, I mean, and it's sort of I've been in the position of hiring in my past, and I can tell
Hmm.
you a lot of it is just subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in a position to hire writers.
Yeah.
And it's, I would love to tell you exactly what it is about your writing didn't click for me, but eh,
It's hard.
you
It's hard. How do
know.
you put your finger on that? Like, yeah. So, I appreciate you sharing that. And, yeah, at least maybe you guys felt better about, but part of what I've found is that So my background, I was in recruiting, but even before that, I was more on the technical side, and I'm almost coming back full circle now because I'm doing a lot of development right now on the AI side with AI-enabled chatbots, and it's funny because sometimes I'll hit an issue which um which I think might be me, right? Like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Did I configure this properly, or did I set this correctly, or is there something wrong with my prompt or my instructions? And then eventually I'll get to a point where I'm going to the forums and the Discord server and I'm asking other people, I'm telling other people what problems I'm having. And they're like, oh yeah, I have the same problem too. I think it's like a bug. And I'm just
Hmm.
like, like it's not me. I'm not, but in those few days leading up to it, I'm just like racking my brain and I want to bang my head up against the
Yeah,
wall. But when I find out, like, it's not me, it's like, it's such a relief to know, like, yeah. And so I think that there's some value and I guess that's the whole premise of NSA, right? But, and hopefully maybe you guys found a little bit of that relief yesterday in your guys' conversation.
yeah. Well, and I feel like a lot of that is just sort of a function of, sort of brain work as a job function,
Yeah.
that it's not like you're not manufacturing something, so there's no sort of outward objective measure of
Yeah.
success.
Yeah.
It's like, did the code work or did it not? Yes, but there's
Yeah.
9 million ways to get working code.
Yeah. 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 It's a bit of an art. And, most folks are engaging in this kind of effort maybe every year, 2 years, 3 years. Some people after 10 years, 15 years of never having to look for a job, never having to brush up their resume, never having to market themselves or interview. So it's one of those weird things where, yeah, I've met a lot of folks that are very good at their profession, at what they do, and but the whole job search and interviewing thing is just weird. It's just even sales folks, right? You would think sales folks would be good at interviewing and job
Yeah.
search. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Hi,
My dad told me, and then that in his 45-year working career, he never had to look for a job.
yeah. Pete, that's what I'm seeing a lot of right now is there's a lot of folks that are out of work and they're at the top of their professional game. They've never had to look for a job because the jobs always came to them. They always got recruited. They always got pulled in to new opportunities by people that they knew, by colleagues. But now it's a really strange time because there's a lot of folks that are out of work and they may have like a stellar career path, career progression, but that muscle maybe never existed or it's atrophied. That muscle of doing a job search and marketing themselves and being sort of self-reflective about what they're good at, what they're not good at, and how do they package and position themselves. That muscle either never existed or it's atrophied over 15 years of never having to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So strange times right now. Sagarika, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, welcome. Uh, Small group today. It's just us. Um, but again, it's the holidays. I think a lot of folks, rightfully so, are tuning out, maybe taking a little bit of time to catch their breath. And I'm planning to do the same. I'm doing this today, and I'm doing this next week for folks that just to maintain some continuity and to give back. But we'll resume sort of week to week in the new year. But um, I mean, maybe just to stimulate some conversation here, among us three, like, I guess, what do you guys see? What are you folks seeing out there in terms of the search, in terms of the job market? Are you guys, it sounds like, I guess, have you seen anything sort of change or pick up, maybe in light of the election, for example? Or I guess, what are you guys seeing out there?
For my part, I've actually been contacted more in the last, say, 3 weeks than in the last 8 months.
Are you kidding?
Nope.
Wow.
And I really have no idea why, because it's sort of for a really weird array of positions.
Uh-huh.
So, like, my background is in marketing and creative project management, and somebody contacted me for a proposal strategist position, and I'm guessing it's because I'm, just sort of relatively close to the position. It's an on-site position in Arizona, where I don't imagine there's a vast candidate pool.
Mm, okay, possible.
That's the only logic I can come up with because there wasn't a hell of a lot on my resume that said I should be your proposal manager,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
other than, sort of content development and content strategy kind of stuff.
Were
Um,
you, by the way, were you reached out to by an internal recruiter, hiring manager, or like an external recruiter?
um, I believe it's an external, like a third party recruiter
Okay.
for this
Okay.
position.
Okay.
I mean, and I have some experience in doing it, but it was never on my resume or anywhere on my experience. Wasn't on my LinkedIn page, anything like that. So it was kind of an intuitive leap on his part, I would say, to get in touch with me.
Did you speak to him already?
I did. And he's going to go back to his client, I guess, today or, this week or something like that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, one of the handy questions that I found is, when you ask, especially when a recruiter reaches out to you, is sort of asking them, what is it about, your LinkedIn profile, if that's how they found you, or your resume that prompted them to reach out.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
I did ask him that and he kind of sidestepped it. So,
Oh, did he?
I mean, which, and it's, if it came down to it's like, well, you're the only person within 100 miles of this place. I'm like, okay, I could, that's a logic at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's one of the other things I'm finding is that I mean, I've been going for creative project manager roles, and there have been no shortage of them.
Posted.
Yeah, but it's hard to tell how many of them are real, for one. And I
Yeah.
also have been getting the impression from people out in the industry that it's super competitive just in the creative fields in general.
Hmm.
Designers, writers, web designers, everybody is having like a terrible time in the creative industry this year. So it's kind of no surprise that, you know, the whole thing would be really, really competitive.
Yeah. Pete, what are your thoughts on AI and how it might be influencing, uh, you know, uh, employers that are hiring for this particular kind of role or need, um, or even at the industry
Yeah.
level? What are you seeing or what are you anticipating?
Well, I think so. One of my, sort of listening tour people, um, it's a friend from college who's been in the kind of creative services management field for a while. And she said that in her work, it's a lot about making things faster.
Mm,
So, getting from kind of like a requirements gathering phase to the creative brief faster. And so
yeah,
she throws all the information into the AI, have it spit out a creative brief, and, gets it done in 20 minutes instead of an hour. And that,
yeah,
those kind of efficiencies are really, really critical.
yeah.
Um, she didn't say anything about in terms of producing the work itself.
Hmm.
But from where I've seen elsewhere, like for example, writers are having a miserable time because employers think that AI can do it. I mean, so I've been in the industry for probably almost 30 years. Um, and I've seen this repeatedly, is that there will be some development that allows significant cost savings
Hmm.
at the expense of quality.
Hmm.
And they will take the cost savings over quality every time. That happened when, sort of offshore vendors first started coming in. It happens with every new succession of offshore vendors. It used to be
Yeah.
India, then it went to China, now it's in Africa, and there's always a quality hit,
Hmm.
but they don't care because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's cheaper to do it twice than it is to do it once with, sort of your A team.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like, um, and maybe, I mean, I'd love to understand a little bit more about what you do with respect to sort of the creative side, but some of the capabilities now with AI seem like they're even in some ways more creative than the average person, whether it has to do with, I don't know, brainstorming, writing articles or business ideas or marketing campaigns or this or that. Like the brainstorming and creative capabilities of AI seem more powerful than the average person. But I'm curious what you've seen.
I think I mean, in terms of where it has its best application would be in the kind of, possibly in the strategizing, possibly um in the organizational side of things, so like if you're writing
Hmm.
an article or a long form research report or something like that, and you can ask, you know, an AI, build me an outline for this research report based on this topic and this data and this, this audience and that kind of thing. And it will generally produce something, at least a good workable framework that you can start with.
Yeah.
Um, in the same, I mean, it's really good at workflows. I used it to develop a number of tools for our staff research analysts because it was able to extract data from static images and then,
Yeah.
sort of make that searchable.
Yeah.
So, there are definitely ways to use it. But I think that people are overusing it. They're asking it to do things that while it can do it, it's not better than a human generated product.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my background is in recruiting, and we run a boutique recruiting agency. Over the past 2 years, we've spun up an offshore virtual assistant agency, basically connecting offshore talent with onshore solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's interesting to see how our virtual assistants are using AI, and even as part of our interviewing process, um, we completely embrace and encourage applicants or candidates that are applying to our VA positions to use AI as part of the interview process. The caveat is I want to see their prompting. I want to see their thread with ChatGPT because it gives me a sense of how they think, how they ask questions, right? And the other thing too is it also gives me a sense of yeah, it gives me a sense of to what extent they are thinking because you can use ChatGPT in a very stupid way, right?
Right.
Um, I've used it in very stupid ways where I'm basically, asking it for something and it gives me something and I refine it to some degree, but and through that process, I don't look at the outputs anymore. So I don't really know what the outputs are anymore. And eventually I get to an output where I don't really know what it is.
Mhm.
It's just a product of whatever I was asking of for it. So if you were to ask me to present on what was outputted, I wouldn't be able to present it well. Like I don't really know. And so that's just an example of I use so I mentioned earlier like I'm developing AI enabled chatbots, and as part of that I'm writing instructions or prompts, right? I'm writing instructions prompts for the chatbot, and I'm using ChatGPT to help me refine the prompts. And that's an example of where I go through this iterative process, and eventually I get a prompt or set of instructions for the GPT for the chatbot, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I should have looked at this sooner because it's like there's stuff in there that doesn't make any sense. So the point being is that there are mindless ways of using ChatGPT or AI to produce something. And that's something that we look for when we're interviewing folks that are using ChatGPT is how are they using it? And to what extent are they using it in a mindful manner? You know, because I'm guilty of it
Right.
too. I've used it in a mindless manner. And we find that a lot when people are just copying and pasting and they don't really know what it is they're pasting. It's
Right.
effectively, yeah. And so, yeah, just a quick example, right? Like, um, so ultimately, the human in the loop needs to be present, right? And yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, and I think at heart, it's no different than any other software problem. It's like, what do you want it to do? And so many people come at it without a good sense of what the problem they're trying to solve is.
yeah,
People just say, well, throw it into GPT and it'll solve it for you. I'm like, well, only if you know what the actual problem is,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
My brother is in healthcare. He's a former chief operating officer, and he was just posting on LinkedIn about a number of AI startups in the healthcare
Hmm.
industry that are sort of designing, that are designed to solve problems within the health insurance industry.
Hmm.
So, they're trying to resolve the inefficiencies in the insurance industry that exist through AI. So,
Yeah.
trying to like preemptively get around denials of service and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I was saying, this is one of the few examples I've seen of AI products that actually address existing problems rather than are out there just looking for a problem to solve.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I mean, just from my own personal experience, in working with, let's say, ChatGPT, is to your point earlier, the quality of the response or the solution that the GPT might propose is really constrained by the quality of the problem that's being posed or the question that's being posed, you know? And I think in my own experience, it's given me like you ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer. You ask a better
Yeah.
question, you get a better answer. You ask a really thoughtful, profound question, you might not get the thoughtful, profound answer from GPT, but at least you'll get closer to that, right? So the quality of the question, the answer is only as good as the quality of the question. And I think that's one thing that this GPT is just using the GPT has helped me ask better questions and ask
Right.
for help better, articulating my ask for help in a more refined and thoughtful way. That's one of the things I've gotten out of it. I've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
I notably better at it. Um, but yeah, and it's telling. It's telling when I can observe, not in real time, but when I could observe a chat thread of a candidate that we're considering for a VA opportunity and how they're interacting with the bot and questions they're asking and how they're responding, it's really telling on how the
Hmm.
person thinks and how they ask questions because they're going to ask the same questions of us, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, it's really telling. Um, and so this technology has been amazing on the recruiting, on the interviewing side. And time, the jury's still out on how it's going to affect recruiting as an industry.
Yeah.
Right now, there's quite a lull, particularly in tech, because that's where most of our recruiting is on the tech side. But I think the jury's still out in terms of how it's going to change recruiting. And I mean, certainly we can do a lot. One recruiter can do a lot more now.
Yeah. Well, now I'm curious to know how I would look to a to an AI. Well, because I
Well,
think
that's
one of the big problems with the whole discourse as, as it's gone so far is that people are focused on the output, the lowest, the last mile of the whole process instead of, so for example, people are worried about, AI writing blog posts. Okay, that's fine.
yeah.
Instead of worrying about AI writing your content marketing strategy or, AI
Oh.
writing your editorial calendar or AI doing the high level strategizing rather than the last nuts and bolts of it,
Hmm.
and it's like, I feel like that's a massive misuse because it's not with the actual last mile execution
Hmm.
that it becomes a helpful tool. It's with the sort of higher order thinking where that kind of iterative, interactive back and forth is more productive.
That's interesting. I run a small business, and so I'm at once the founder, executive, but I'm also the largely the doer, right? I'm largely executing on ideas that I have, and I use ChatGPT a lot at sort of the strategic level for brainstorming, and that's where I'm more apt to have, I think, more apt to have like the human in the loop. Whereas some of the lower level stuff, I'm more apt to be just like, okay, whatever it gives me is good enough. I'm not going to really think too deeply or even QA the work as much. Um, but yeah, I think part of the point is that this AI, this technology is going to be sort of impacting everything at all levels across all industries. So both vertically and horizontally, like we're seeing that with people, even with companies that are not sort of entirely AI embracing, but grassroots, the people that are on the ground floor, they're using it on a personal and professional, individual basis to improve their productivity, improve their capabilities and capacities. You mentioned the woman that was seeing how AI can help with throughput or speed, right? And yeah, it's everybody has that intern now in their pocket that can do a lot of stuff, or at least do a lot of thinking and research and stuff like that. And they're only going to get better, and it's only going to get more like they can start doing things on its own, not just thinking and rendering responses, but they can start taking action, um, pursuant to some sort of goal that you set. Um, we haven't really seen that yet as prevalent, but that's sort of the next sort of wave. I think that's going to be really interesting. So,
Down. I mean, and I think one of the things that, is often left out is how much AI is currently in use already. I mean, like automated fraud detection systems at every
mm,
financial system, um,
yeah,
I mean, it's a,
the,
it's a different kind of AI, but it's still
yeah.
AI.
Yeah, I think what's blown everybody's minds over the past 2 years is just, this generative AI where it's like it's making, it feels very human. And it's making, um, it's effectively making software accessible to people that don't know how to code. Because, as a lay person, you could just ask it for what you want or ask it to do something, and it'll kind of it'll kind of do it. You don't have to code it, you know.
Right.
You don't have to really modify your language. I mean, again, to the extent that you can refine your ask more articulately, more precisely, more nuanced, it'll provide you
Hmm.
with a more nuanced response or answer. But, my kid can use it. My 9-year-old, 6-year-old kid can use it and do all kinds of cool stuff, creating stories and things like that. But I think that's what's blown everybody's mind. And then it feels like it's a human, like to some degree, you know? Um,
I mean, it certainly sounds like one.
right. And then now with all the multimodal stuff, right? Like, and again, it's still in its infancy in many ways, but like interacting with the video aspect right now it's largely chat or text, but interacting with the video or the audio aspect of a persona or a person, um, that's, representative of the GPT. It's like really, yeah. Our kids are gonna, I don't know if you have kids, but my kids are gonna grow up in some crazy, crazy different world that we have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just changing faster and faster.
I mean,
Um,
it's yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, Pete, I gotta jump.
Sure.
It was great chatting with you here. Just this conversation has turned into like a little podcast. Um, I appreciate your time, and I'll be doing this next week, and then we'll kick it off more regularly, and in the new year. And Sagarika, next time I hope you could chime in. Would love to hear some of your thoughts. Um, all right, I'll let you guys go. Thanks for your time, and catch up next week or in the new year.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Pete. Bye.
Bye.